Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I'm Amanda Miner, a library consultant here at MLC, and we'll be talking about one-person libraries today. Okay. This webinar focuses on ways to improve your own experience as a solo librarian and how those improvements can better the services you provide your community. And this just shows a little overview of different topics we're going to talk about today. You may be asking yourself, who is this person and what does she know about one-person libraries and small libraries? As I mentioned earlier, I'm a library consultant here at the Mississippi Library Commission. Here at MLC, I get to work with librarians all over the state, including a few one-person and many small libraries. Prior to working at MLC, I was a school librarian at a rural high school, and prior to that, I worked at a small rural library, meaning there were normally only 2 staff members working at any given time. So not quite a one-person library, but it was a small library with a similar experience. Working as a school librarian is definitely very similar to working in a one-person public library. I do understand the sense of overwhelm that can come along with being the only librarian. It can definitely be difficult to try to be everything to everyone all at once. So I hope all of you solo librarians, small library workers find this webinar helpful because I know it can be hard. Okay. Who is this webinar for? The solo librarian or almost solo librarian. This information is for anyone in a one-person library or almost. Those working in small libraries should find it helpful too. Okay, our first topic. My first topic for tips for the solo librarian touches on the subject of isolation. Being the only staff member in your library day in and day out can feel lonely and isolating. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and get burned out quickly when you feel like there is no one around to help you or commiserate with. Let's talk about a few ways to combat those feelings. Okay. Solo counterparts. If you're a solo librarian, especially in a rural area, chances are there's another one-person library or small library in your general area. Reach out to them. They could serve as a great connection for you to ask questions and talk about your shared experiences. Whether they become someone you call for advice frequently or just email occasionally, the potential connection could be worth a shot. If you're part of a system, reach out to other system staff in a similar way. Online connections. Since there are a ton of different ways to connect with other solo librarians and small library workers online, there are social media groups, forums, newsletters, blogs, and tons of other things. A few social media groups include the Tiny Library Think Tank, ALA Library Think Tank, which are both on Facebook, and MLC also has their Facebook group, Mississippi Library Support Resources. There are countless social media accounts dedicated to work in libraries and even specifically work in small and rural libraries. Just do a quick search on your favorite platform, and I'm sure you'll find tons of stuff. Okay. Continuing education. Attending continuing education events is a great way to fight isolation and burnout. Recorded webinars like this one and live webinars are a great option. Library-related conferences are a great option too. As a solo librarian or small library worker, it can definitely be more difficult to attend conferences in person. If that's not possible for you, keep in mind that many conferences offer a virtual option. Even if all you have time for is to read an article or two from a journal or website, any form of continuing education is a great way to beat burnout and feel motivated about your work again. It's also a great way to get ideas and make connections with other librarians in a similar situation that you may never meet otherwise. Sometimes it may not feel like you have the time to attend a webinar or even read an article, but sometimes it's important to prioritize connection. I've created a resource sheet to go along with this webinar. It will include some examples of good CE resources. If you're interested in that, I can send it over afterward, or there'll be a link in the description of this video. Okay. Volunteers. This topic is starting to dip into what we'll talk about next, which is time management, but bringing in volunteers can help with the struggles that come with being in a one-person library. by combating those feelings of isolation and helping with time management issues. But let's talk more about time management and we'll circle back to volunteers. Okay, time management. While I was working on this webinar, I came across a great book called How to Thrive as a Solo Librarian. It's a collection of essays from solo librarians edited by Carol Smallwood and Melissa J. Clapp. There was a quote in one of the sections about time management I really liked that said, "The truth about juggling is we all drop the ball sometime, especially when the balls are different weights, shapes, and sizes." I think that this is a great way to put it, especially in the context of one person and small libraries. It's important to manage your time wisely, plan ahead, make goals, and everything else. But it's just as important to prioritize. That book is really great. Also, I would highly recommend it if you're interested in learning more about solo librarianship. Okay. Mentioning to-do lists when talking about time management probably feels a little on the nose, but it is a very helpful thing to do. And as a solo librarian, the most overwhelming thing can often be deciding what to do since you have to do everything yourself and there is no one there to direct you. So you can let your list direct you. I find that it's a good idea to make a to-do list at the end of each day. So when you get to work the next day, you have a general idea of everything that needs to get done. And if other work tasks get in the way, which they often do, then you still have your list and can roll those tasks over to the next day. It's also a good idea to have one or more short-term and long-term goals. Have these goals posted somewhere visible, like on a whiteboard or large sheet of paper on the wall. Break down these goals into small, digestible nuggets. As you are filling your to-do list each afternoon, try to work in some of these small nuggets. This will help you chip away at your goals, which all of this is probably nothing you haven't heard before. The actual execution of these tasks is the hard part. Different people will have different ways of going about planning and managing their time. Some may prefer physical planners and to check off their list as they go about their day. That's a great way to do things, but I do have some online tools that I think you all may find helpful. Our first time management tool is Todoist. Todoist is a free online to-do list tool. It allows you to make to-do lists for multiple projects. You can check off tasks as you complete them or move them to another date and time if you need to. You can set productivity goals, like I want to accomplish 5 tasks on this project in the next 10 days, or however you'd like to set it up. It's a really great tool and it's free. It has a mobile app as well. And another tool is Mural, is an online tool where you can plan in a less structured way than your classic to-do list. It is sort of like a digital bullet journal or notepad. You can add sticky notes, insert links, make charts, add images and icons, and you can bring in collaborators. This is another great free resource for planning ahead and staying organized, maybe for people who don't like as much structure as people who may like Todoist. Todoist also has a mobile app and it's free. Another app, this is my favorite one probably, is called Remember the Milk. Remember the Milk is an online and mobile app that is actually very similar to Todoist, but its major differences are that you can set it up to send you reminders about tasks through text and email for free. You can do that on Todoist, but it's pay. You have to pay on Todoist. You can set up the reminders to come at a certain time or even when you arrive at or leave a certain location if you have your location services on. This is a great tool and it's a lifesaver if you're very forgetful or you just have many tasks and projects going on at once, which you can break down your lists by project or personal life, work life, however you want to do it. A couple other tools I'll mention that I don't have slides on are Evernote and Canva. Evernote is, again, very similar to Remember the Milk and Todoist, but it offers a little more room for customization. With each list, you can have notes, images, documents, uploads of things like receipts. There is both a free and paid version of Evernote. It's kind of more like a journal with time management features. Canva, which I'm sure you've all used, is an online design tool. You can use it to make graphics for social media or posters or presentations, but it also offers a lot of different options for planners and calendars that are customizable, which those could be used online or you could print them out. If you're more of a paper and hand person, you could create your own planner, your own to-do list, your whatever you think you need, your own bullet journal, however you want it. Okay, and back to volunteers. As we talked about earlier, volunteers can be a great help in one-person libraries. Having someone around to help could ease the overwhelm of doing it all yourself. Whether or not volunteers are a good idea for your library is definitely a personal choice that will come down to what you know about your library and your community, but I think they are definitely a great possible resource to tap into in your community. If you decide you want to look into bringing in volunteers, you'll need to think about the community you're in and what untapped demographic of volunteers you may have. For some communities, this may be older adults, members of service organizations, or teens. For older adults or service organization members, you could reach out directly to local organizations, clubs, or even post an ad in the paper or online. For any volunteers, I would suggest requiring an application and interview. This is a great step to take to not only vet the person you're interested in for a volunteer, but also to get to know them and their interests better. For teens, you could reach out to local high schools. Some libraries may stray away from bringing in teen volunteers, but teens can be a great option. Most teens are highly tech savvy and could be a big help for patrons who need computer assistance. Most teens also need volunteer hours for scholarships, clubs, sports, or other extracurriculars. There are almost certainly teens in your area that are in need of volunteer hours and may just have never considered the library as an option. Bringing in volunteers could seem like a daunting undertaking, but you must remember for every couple of hours of training you provide a volunteer, that volunteer can provide you back hundreds of hours of help in your library. Okay. On to the next topic is safety and security. For the one-person library, safety and security might be the most important topic. Being all by yourself in the library or even in a small group, often in a rural area, can present risks. So let's go over some tips to stay safe. Okay, lone worker safety tips. If you work alone or even in a small group, it's a good idea to check in with someone upon arriving to work and when you head home each day. If you are part of a library system, this could be your director or another staff member from a different library. If you don't have any work-related person to call, consider checking in with someone from your personal life or maybe even a trusted person from a nearby business or institution. If you're not already as a one-person or small library, it's a great idea to get to know your library's neighbors. If you decide they are someone you can trust, they could help you out in a pinch and potentially keep you safe. Outside of calling when you arrive and when you leave, it's also a good idea to have a few other set times that you check in with someone throughout the day. It's nice to have someone that is expecting to hear from you at a certain time or someone that calls to check in on you at a certain time. That way you'll be safe and accounted for during your whole shift. If you're a one-person library, it can be hard to keep your eyes on your whole space at all times. It's a good idea to limit entrances to one, or at least limit available entrances to ones that are in your line of sight the majority of the time. It's a good idea to keep track of everyone who enters and leaves, and having a limited number of entrances will make this a lot easier. You may also consider a chime or bell that announces someone's entrance in case you are out of sight when someone comes in. As a lone worker, it's important to limit your time outside the building, especially at night. If you can avoid doing tasks like taking out the trash or checking the book drop when it's dark, that could avoid unnecessary risk. It's also important to not complete tasks that could be unsafe when you're alone. This could include moving heavy objects, climbing on tall ladders, or anything that you feel you may not be able to physically complete without help. If you have any doubt at all that you can successfully complete the task by yourself, wait until someone can come to the library to assist you. Otherwise, you could hurt yourself and be stranded until the next patron comes by. If you commonly feel unsafe, it may be a good idea to look into getting a one-touch emergency alert system. This could be a classic button under the counter type system or a wearable alert button. There are also mobile apps that can act as a one-touch emergency alert system. Working alone, it's important to have clear lines of sight. Any area in your library that you cannot see from your normal workstation is considered a blind spot. Blind spots should be avoided as much as possible. Due to the setup of shelves and furniture, many libraries, especially small libraries, don't allow for there to be absolutely no blind spots. In areas that a blind spot cannot be avoided, it's a good idea to install corner blind spot mirrors like the ones commonly seen in grocery and retail stores. To keep an eye on things, it's also a good idea to do a random roam around the library anywhere from once an hour to a few times a day. It will depend on what you feel your library needs as to how often you roam. A quick walk of the floor can do a lot for your safety as well as your patrons' safety. For all libraries, and especially one-person libraries, it is important to have a closing procedure. Whatever this may mean for you, it's important to have a defined closing procedure that includes checking all doors, windows, and enclosed spaces in the library before leaving. Some libraries choose to have video surveillance systems. If this is your choice, make sure you develop policies that clearly address all forms of video surveillance that may occur in your library and that it's publicly known your space is under video surveillance. If you're looking for more tips on lone worker safety, I would recommend checking out susielamplugh.org. It's the website for the Susie Lamplugh Trust, which I may be completely saying that last name wrong, which is an organization advocating for lone worker safety out of the UK. It is a great website with resources on lone worker safety. It has pamphlets and training materials, all 9 yards. With safety and security measures, it's important to document everything. This starts with having some form of security policy. This will look different for every library, but generally it should outline your library's security practices and procedures. These practices and procedures may include the need to complete incident reports and/or suspicious activity reports. These forms would be completed when an actual security-related incident occurs or when something you deem suspicious occurs. It's important to trust your gut and document anything you deem suspicious or unsettling. It never hurts to write something down. This backlog of documentation could prove beneficial in the event that particular security issues persist to the point of having to contact law enforcement. On the topic of law enforcement, contact information for all local emergency services should be kept beside all phones in your library so they can be easily contacted if the need arises. Improving your experience as a solo or small library by lessening your feelings of isolation, improving your time management skills, and amping up your safety and security habits will in turn improve the services you provide to your community. When you are less stressed and overwhelmed and feel more secure, you will be able to better serve your community. Most one-person or small libraries are in small and rural communities. This has its pros and cons, but being part of a small community can be a big benefit for a library. Being part of a small community can make it a lot easier to reach out to other entities in your community for partnerships. Partnerships can increase your small library's capacity for impact through programming, volunteer hours, funding, and many other forms of support. Having a small service area just means that it's easier to reach everyone. Attending community events and promoting your library can be easier and more cost-effective when you have a smaller number of potential patrons to reach. In rural areas, word travels fast, both by mouth and on social media, so leverage both of those things. An active social media does wonders for bringing patrons into libraries of any size, but a small rural library could see a monumental change if they start making frequent posts on social media. People in rural areas are always looking for something to do, but they won't know your events if you don't spread the word about them. Attending events and spreading the word about your services and programs lets people in your community know that the library is a welcoming place with a lot to offer. This is another area where strong partnerships and good volunteers would be a huge help. For a solo librarian or small library, programming can seem overwhelming. You may feel like you don't have time for programming on top of everything else you do. This would be a great time to lean on your partnerships and volunteers. Find out what their skills or interests are. They may be interested in hosting a program with your help. One person can only do so much, and there is certainly untapped talent and knowledge in your community. Find out what resources you have in your volunteers, your friends group, your community, and even resources you may have within yourself. Programming should be a collaborative effort. You don't have to do it all alone. This is a perfect example of why it's important to reach out to others and to watch webinars, read articles, and do other continuing education activities. That way you can get excited for new ideas and find out things from other people in the library community. And remember the small library motto: do what you can with what you have where you are. This is my reference sheet. If you want to look into any of the references I looked toward while making this webinar, you can write these down, copy and paste the links to look through some of those references. Thank you so much for listening today. Here's my contact information. I can be contacted at aminer@mlc.lib.ms.us or at 601-432-4066 on the phone. If you're interested in learning more about this topic or have any questions or suggestions, please reach out to me anytime. As I mentioned earlier, I have put together a resource sheet with links and information mentioned in this webinar. If you'd like to take a look at that, it's linked in the notes section of this video below. Again, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.